Hey, hey, dear beloveds. I am very joyful to be here with you in a slightly delayed way. I had a great question from Anna, I think last week, in regards to the question of where trauma is stored, or where we store our body memory in response to fearful life events or physical trauma. And basically, I think really looking at that idea of, are we quantum or are we physical? And that's the level that I'm going to respond to this at, because I think the question is really big, and I don't think anyone knows emphatically the answer. I think if you want to dive into looking at this work, really deeply, Bruce Lipton's work is a wonderful resource. And I'm going to draw a little bit on that in my response. But I think what I want to say about it, and what I would consider myself to be more able to speak to with confidence, is really around our perception of what we are. So remember, the whole Initiate program is designed to get you to change your mind about what you are, and to give up the idea that you are physical, and to begin to truly move into the state of understanding that you are pure consciousness. Pure consciousness means that in 3D reality, if you like, you are more wave than particle. And what causes us to behave as more particle is over-identification with 3D reality. So wherever we're in fear, we become more particle, less wave, and that means we become more fixed. We know that neurologically, the brain doesn't know the difference between what you're experiencing and what you're recalling or remembering. Therefore, we can really solidify ourselves, become way more over-identified with 3D by continually playing in our mind the traumatic events of our life. And that sort of, if you like, turns us into solid matter. It's still only happening at the level of illusion. I'll get to that in a moment. But it's this idea that we actually get to determine how pure potential we are and how fixed matter we are. And that is very much about our identification with form versus our willingness to know that we are pure vibration. We are but a vibration. This is quantum physics. There's no argument here. This is not something that's open for discussion. It is simply truth. We are made up of particles that are not actually solid, but if you go down to the level of the subatomic particle, you'll see that it's pure energy. It's a wave. That wave creates a field. That field creates a field. The next level up to the atom and to the cell, and so on until we have the entire cosmos, which is, a field that we are housed in. So we aren't solid in any way. And whilst we believe that we're fixed, we will over-identify with form, and will believe that our pain and our stories of suffering and our trauma are housed inside of a physical body. But of course, that's not possible when you recognize that there is no solid matter here in this 3D reality. Let's zoom out a little bit on that. What I have been teaching you through the Initiate program, what I believe is to be true, and therefore is the core philosophy, is that the dream of 3D reality, Earth School, is simply that. It's a place where we come to train our consciousness, where we are located physically. Who knows? Are we somewhere else and we just kind of project our consciousness into the dream? It doesn't really matter. We can't possibly know that while we're inside of the dream, but that it is a dream. And it's a dream that our consciousness dreams into being, and therefore nothing inside of the dream is real. So we simply cannot know, or we simply cannot believe from this perception, from this particular philosophical viewpoint, that anything that happens in the dream can cause us harm. Therefore, there is no trauma. Therefore, there is no storehouse of the trauma. Let's come back again to the 3D reality and look at what the people who are much more knowledgeable from the scientific perspective than I am say. So Bruce Lipton says that basically trauma is when your body goes through an event, emotionally or physically, that's too big to process in the moment. That is trauma, and that is stored as neuropeptides in the body. When that happens, it's so that we can come back at a time soon afterwards to process that pain and release it from our body. what happens though is that we never do that because we don't know how to meet our fear. We don't know how to come back because we're not taught. We're taught to run from our fear. So we're taught to avoid these heavy feelings. We're taught to avoid looking at our pain and our fear because we're not shown how to do it in a way that's safe and a way that's actually going to release the neuropeptides and actually get that process of stored fear moving out from the body. So instead, we spend decades with this inside of us, and then, of course, we create illnesses that match up with that. So if we look at it that way, what Caroline May says is that our bodies are optimized not to store or hold on to trauma or grievances. We're actually optimized to release these heavier fear-based emotions, but once again, we're not shown how. And so we actually have created a culture that privileges suffering. And we've created a culture that talks about my trauma, my pain, my anxiety. And we become very protective of our suffering stories, and we form, groups around them, and then we consider that to be, healing, when in fact all that is creating a culture of woundology, as Caroline May says, where we are connected to our pain as a form of identification. So we actually become self-identifying with that, and then we are identified by our community as a survivor of this or a sufferer of that, or someone who has endured this, and we, oh my God, she's so amazing because she can survive that trauma, or she's lived through that grief, or she's sustained herself in that, and still she's here, and yeah, all of that's amazing, except for if we go back to the big picture perspective, once again, it never happened. Now, A Course in Miracles tells us that true forgiveness is the recognition that the thing you think you need to forgive never happened. Why did it never happen? Because nothing is happening at the level of the dream. It's a hallucination. It's a place for us to play and learn about our consciousness. And yet we are so invested in it that we believe it's real, and therefore we need to find ways and strategies to move within it. So we've got the really, really big picture part. This is but a dream. It never really happened. It's not happening even now. It's simply a figment of my imagination. I'm learning to train my consciousness, right down to the level where, okay, if it is, we experience the trauma or the suffering or the fear-based emotions, they're stored in the body temporarily to be released, but we have not learned how to do that, so we never actually release these heavy, burdensome emotions, and then we create illness, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual. That understanding then of where is that trauma stored, it's obviously in the neuropeptides, it's that chemical release that happens. But Greg Braden tells us that because we are simply part of the field is the dream, but let's say we're all part of that field, the field is where everything is stored. Everything is stored in the field. There is not a separate single body here. So how could my separate single body store anything? This is an illusion. I am simply vibrating, and I'm vibrating in a way that makes it seem as though I am solid and fixed and separate from the world around me, but I'm not. So everything within the field of the cosmos, or the dream, contains the whole, remember? So everything that I contain within me, my perception that I'm separate and finite, is contained within the field. And therefore, that's why it's our responsibility as mystics and intuitives to meet our fear, because when we release our fear, we release the fear on behalf of the entire field. It's not just about making ourselves happy, it's actually our service. So we need to stop thinking in the illusion of solid matter. And that's how I think we can begin to understand trauma, and we can begin to understand that trauma only exists because we've judged it as good or bad based on a human reality perspective. And if we zoom right out to that infinite field idea, to the idea of the dream, then we can see that nothing has gone wrong. We're here simply to train. And if a child was playing a video game, and in that video game they crashed their car into a wall and their character died, you wouldn't say, okay, now you're dead. You would say, okay, start again. You've got new lives, turn it off and start again. But we behave as though what's happening in the dream is the be all and end all. And until we change our mind about that, I do not believe that we can truly free ourselves. So I think getting caught up in the ideas of where is trauma stored is to be thinking in those 3D terms. And let's zoom out, and let's, thanks to Anna, we're able to have this brilliant conversation and start thinking of ourselves as unharmable, because we the true essence of what we are doesn't reside inside of the dream. We've just projected our consciousness temporarily into the dream in order to learn about ourselves. And what we're learning is that we are God, we are infinite, unlimited, never-ending consciousness. And when we live from that point of view, we stop treating the symptoms of the dream and we start living fearlessly. And that's my opinion. I hope that helps, dear Anna. I hope everyone else who's here has enjoyed that. If you've got your thoughts, please add them. As I say, this is simply my philosophy. I do not know that anybody can conclusively answer this. I'm simply basing it on looking at the literature from my favorite teachers and considering my own understanding of the way things are. And I believe that we've got so much more capacity to free ourselves from ideas of suffering simply by changing our perception of what we are, rather than trying to fix the symptoms of the dream. Whenever you start trying to fix the symptoms of the dream, we're going to suffer. And there are some things that, of course, as we've learned through the beautiful conversation with Doris last week, or the week before, I can't remember when it was, there are ways that we can move that perception more quickly. Olfactory senses, going into altered states of consciousness, accessing the subconscious mind through our devotional practices. These are all ways that we can lessen the grip that the ego has on us and the over-identification with form. So whenever you are over-identified with form, you're going to be in fear. Fear is what grounds you or roots you into the earth. Over-identification with your pain stories is how you become really lost to yourself. And so this is a totally different way of thinking about what we are and how to approach it. Anyway, I'm off. I'm going to be working on my audiobook this week. I'm very excited about that. Any other questions, let me know, because I'd love to continue to be a resource. And of course, everybody here has great wisdom. So please feel free to share anything you want. Go live at any time and have a beautiful week. Bye.